Alright. Looks like we are live. Alright. We're going to be going over an interesting Dub Techno rhythmic chord technique this morning. I hope you can hear the music okay. I hope you can hear my voice okay. What's happening, Tony? What's happening, Dub Station Zero? Thanks for tuning in, you guys. It's going to be a super casual stream today. If you're catching this on the replay, thanks for joining me. And have a sip of the coffee here. Thanks. All right. What I'd like to share with you today is a technique that I've come up with for creating some more interesting dub techno style chord patterns. You can hear in the example that I'm playing now, we've got that sort of typical long, just dun 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 dun, dun that really long sort of delay tail type dub chord. There's not a lot of movement in the chord here though. It's just a stab that sort of trails out. What we're going to do today is I'm going to share with you a technique for getting a little bit more interest in your dub chord patterns. We're going to start with a brand new project today. I'm going to go new project. If you have any questions along the way whatsoever, please feel free to ask those in the chat, and I will do my best to answer those as we go through the stream. This might be a relatively long one today. I'm going to try to go slowly and take my time and explain this technique deeply, for lack of a better word. Okay, so we've got a brand new session here, and the first thing that I want to do is I want to load up 8 individual dub chord samples that are playing the same chord. What the chord is doesn't matter. What sample pack you're using doesn't matter, as long as the chord stabs that we're loading are all playing the same chord. If you don't have a Dub Techno sample pack, but you've got a synthesizer handy, feel free to record some dub stabs into your tracker or tracker mini. That works as well. The Tracker Mini just got an update to where it can now record stereo samples via the line in as well as playback stereo samples. It could always play back stereo samples, but previously the line in would only record in mono. So now it records in stereo as well, so that's awesome. Today we're going to be using my sample pack called Dub Spectrum that I've put out for the Polyend Tracker and Polyend Tracker Mini. I'm using that because I have like 100 chord stabs that are all playing the same chord that are easily choosable for us in this example today. But again, any sample pack you've got with chord stabs, preferably Dub Techno style chord stabs in the same chord is, applicable in this example. So we're going to go down to the folder of Dub Spectrum Dub Chord Stabs, and we're going to enter that folder. Hey, what's happening, Half God, Half Beast? Thanks for tuning in. Again, if anybody has any questions along the way today, please feel free to ask those, and I'll do my best to answer those. We're going to start by loading 8 chord samples, and the purpose of this is our first order of business today is to create a sample chain of Dub Techno chord stabs. Now, what's a sample chain? That's going to be one long sample file that has 8 individual sounds in it. Okay, this is kind of an intense process. The getting started part is, a little bit bordering on sound design. So we're going to take our time and, get this going here. So let's preview the first chord stab in this folder. All of these chord stabs are in F minor, which is my favorite key to write in. That sounds great. We're going to go ahead and load that one. And I want to just keep loading multiple samples. So instead of hitting add, I'm actually going to hit add next. And that's going to load that sample into the first instrument slot and then select the second instrument slot within the tracker or the Tracker Mini so that we can continue loading samples here. I'm going to make sure that I'm giving enough volume out to the stream on these as we get started, because I have a feeling it might be a little bit low as we get started here. Yeah, it's probably better. Hope you guys can hear that okay. Hey, what's happening, Les? Thanks for tuning in. Alright, that sounds pretty good. Let's go ahead and load that one the same way we did the first one by hitting the Add Next. Whoops. We need to select an empty slot before we do that, and then Add Next. Okay. Ooh, that's nice. Let's do that. Now we're looking, oh, for Pete's sake, we're looking preview. Yeah, we're looking to load a total of 8 dub stabs to begin with today. Getting started is probably going to take a little bit of time, and for those of you who like to work really fast and not take a lot of time in setting things up, this is going to be excruciatingly boring. But if you watch this on the replay, I will have gone back and put timestamps into these different sections so you can bypass like the loading of samples and the creating of these sample chains if you so desire to get the rest of the information. Excuse me. All right. So that was number 4. Yeah, that's great. Basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to load 8 chord stabs that sound relatively similar but are different, okay? And that it's really important that they're all playing the same chord, okay? So there's number 4. That's fantastic. Let's add that one. Ooh, that's a really good one. Let's add that one. I'm looking for a total of 8 now. We've got 6 loaded so far. That's nice. Cool. Okay, we'll load that one. So now we've got a total of 8 chord stabs loaded. All right. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go over to the arrangement screen and we're going to hit the record button so we can enter these notes. We basically got 8 different instruments, okay? And what well, actually before we enter the instruments, what I want to do is I want to change the amplitude envelope of these sounds so that when I trigger the sounds in the tracker that they don't play in their entirety, that it just plays a short stab. We're going to take off basically the whole Dub Techno style delay trail, excuse me, had a hard time with that. The Dub Techno style delay trail, we're going to take that off of all of these 8 samples so that it's just a donk, donk, and not a dong, 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 dong. You know what I'm saying? We're going to tighten them up a little bit. So if we go to the sample page in the Tracker Mini and then we press the 2 button again, that's going to get us to the page where we can adjust the envelope settings for each sound. I'm going to select sample 1 by holding instrument and selecting that sample from the list, and here we're presented with our volume envelope. Okay, really simple stuff so far. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to take the sustain all the way down to 0 so that there's no sustain on the sample at all, and we're going to take the decay up to maybe like 0.300 milliseconds. I'm going to take the release on these down to maybe, yeah, perfect. Okay, so we've taken the decay down to 0.400 and we've taken the release down to 0.300. You can hear that when I trigger the sample now, it's just that hit. We lost that tail entirely. Okay, speed it up, dude. And now we're going to do that same thing 8 times. So I've selected sample number 2 now. I'm going to take the decay up to 0.400. I'm going to bring that release down to perfect, 0.400 again. I'm going to select sample number 3. We're going to do that same thing. We're going to take the sustain down. We're going to take the release down. And we're going to put that decay up. Perfect. Okay, we're going to select sample number 4. We're going to take that release down to 0.400, take the sustain all the way down, and take the decay up to 0.400. Okay, these are starting to sound a lot more similar because like the built-in tails and all those effects are completely gone, and we want that. These are in fact different samples and different sounds, but they're very similar in sound because they came from the same sample pack. Now you can either exploit something like that where you're using samples from the same designer, from the same sample pack, or you can grab different chords from different sample packs and, you know, make them as varied as you like. It's the technique here that's important that I'm trying to get across. So we're going to take the sustain down on the next sample, bring the decay up to 0.400 and the release down to 0.400. We're going to go to instrument number 6, take that sustain all the way down, take that decay all the way up. Let's see if we can get away with 500 this time. Now let's go with 4 so that it's a little bit cleaner still. Maybe even, oh, whoops. maybe even, 'cause I want to get rid of like any, like that tiny little bit of, perfect, that tiny little bit of delay tail at the end of the samples. I want those all to be gone. That's really the important thing here. All right. Perfect. Last one. All right. So it's really not that time consuming. I know a lot of people these days are just about, getting things done so fast, but if you're not willing to take the time to put into creating your music, I can't expect, my listeners to put in the time to listening to my music. I want to give them a product that I spent time, energy, and passion on so that they'll, find their time not wasted when they're listening to my music and not think it's crap. You know what I mean? Certainly, when famous bands that we all know and love, like someone like the Beatles, for example, like huge legend bands, they didn't go into the studio and be like, we need to get this track done in 20 minutes. I mean, they spent like days creating this music. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, even though the world is moving really fast today. Slow down, take a breath, and create the music, with a soul. Little tip from your Uncle Dean. All right, so we're back over now to the arrangement page, and I'm just going to put all of these samples in a row. We're going to start by putting in sample number 1. We're going to start by putting in sample number 2. Whoops, sorry about that. Instrument number 2. Instrument number 3. And I'm just spacing them out evenly, and that's what's important here, that they're spaced out evenly. Okay, with the exact same amount of distance in between each sample. Number 6, and this is what we're doing right now, is we're creating what's called a sample chain. Okay, and so it's a 32 step pattern, which is just 2 bars, and I've put in one of these samples on every quarter note. So if I play what we've got here, just playing through each of these 8 samples, right? And we can hear how they're all pretty similar sounding, okay? And, for this purpose, I want it to be that way. What we're going to do is we're going to hit Shift and 2 to go over to, we're just going to hit Shift and 1, rather, to go over to the arrangement screen so I can select tempo and so that I can bring that down a little bit to create a little bit more space between these sounds. Now if I press play, it's going to play a little slower, maybe even a little slower again. That's perfect. See how there's a little bit of space now as each sample plays before the next sample plays? That's absolutely perfect, and that's what we want. What we're going to do now is we're going to render out this even chain of 8 different chord stab samples, okay? This is step 1. So there's quite a few steps to this process, as you may have guessed. Let's have another sip of the coffee. I'm not sure how long this stream is going to be. It might be a little bit of a long one because not only do I want to show you the technique to create these kind of unique rhythmic chord loops that we're going to end up creating, but we'll probably end up, then trying to create a little bit of a groove with some of them after we create them as well. So let's go ahead and save this session so that we can come back to this as needed. We're going to just save this in the main folder here, and I'm going to take a moment and label this. Always label your stuff so that you can come back to it. I'm not really a big fan of the auto name in this because if it labels it some weird name, how are you really going to know? And you're going to end up loading like 6 projects to find the one you want. So I just kind of take the time and label things appropriately. So we're going to call this chord and chord chains. This is so we can come back to this at any time if we need to. All right, so chord chains, and we're going to save that. I'm going to check the chat real quick. All right. Again, if you have any questions at all, whether they be about the tracker or about something else music related, feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer those today. So we've saved our project, and it's called chord chains, okay? Now what we want to do is we want to export the pattern that we've created. So I'm just going to hit export, and we're going to hit export pattern, and there we have it. It's going to export that pattern into a folder, so that's one sample with all of those 8 chord stabs evenly spaced out. Okay, now we're going to get a little bit deeper, and we're going to create that exact same thing 2 more times. But rather than having to load like a whole new session and go back through with the amplitude envelopes and change those all down again, what we can do is we can actually load 8 new stabs into the sample slots on the right hand side here, and it's going to keep those same envelope settings. So all I have to do is start previewing. Again, there we have it. That's a fantastic sounding one. So I'm going to go add next, and it's going to ask me, do you want to replace that instrument? And I'm going to say, yes, I do. So now in the first slot, it's recorded the new sample. So I'm going to replace all 8 samples here with 8 different chords. You're going to need a sample pack that has quite a few, dub stabs in the same chord to be able to do this. It's another reason why we're using my Dub Spectrum sample pack today, because there's like 100 chord stabs in F minor in this folder. That sounds great, so I'm going to hit add next. Do I want to replace it? Yes. I'm going to keep scrolling. Ooh, dope. Add next. Yes, replace it. Ooh, that one's good. So let's go add next. Yes, replace it. That one's a whole different vibe than the other samples, which could be nice, but we're going to maybe pass on that one. We're going to go add next and add that one. Ooh, that's dope. So add and replace. We've now replaced 6 of the 8 samples. I like that one. Let's add that one. And then we just need to find one more now. Ooh, that's cool. So add next and replace. Alright, so what we've got now is we've got the exact same session, but it's got 8 different chord stabs in it. And if I press play, it just plays those quick little hits just like before, right? And what I want to do is I want to export this as its own individual file. So Shift and 3 to get to the save menu per se. And we've already saved our original session. I don't need to resave this because it doesn't matter that it has new chords in it or anything. And I just want to go export. And I want to go export the pattern. And now it's rendering that pattern to a wave. Just one sample with all of those 8 chord stabs. Now we just need to do that one more time. So Shift and 2 to get back into the load menu. I'm going to pick the top sample slot again and keep previewing these chord stabs. That sounds dope, so let's add next, and yes, I want to replace. Ooh, that's dope. Add next, replace. Whoops. Ooh, that's dope. Add next and replace. Ooh, I like that one. So add next and replace. It's important that we're getting this amount of variety when we're in the beginning of the process. So take your time. Make sure you're loading chord stabs that you like the sound of. Ooh, that's dope. So add next. That's cool. Add next. Ooh, dope. Add next. And we just need one more now. Taking my time on that last one. Okay, so add next. And now we've got another set of 8 samples that if I press play, it's just going to play those little stabs, right? So we just want to export this now to its own individual file. I'm going to go Shift and 3. I'm going to go export, and we're going to go export pattern. So what we've done now is we've created from existing chords a set of 3 individual sample chains. And each chain of samples has 8 individual chord stabs. What I want to do now is I want to start a brand new project. So we're going to go new project. Fantastic. And now we're going to go Shift and 2 to get back to the loading menu. And I'm going to go to the export folder on the hard drive of the tracker. Again, this is the exact same process for the tracker and the tracker mini. The only difference is that the tracker mini can load full stereo samples and record full stereo samples, whereas the original tracker is limited to mono only samples. It's one of the reasons why I absolutely am loving using the tracker mini, because I'm not limited to mono samples. Okay, I need to go up one more folder, and instead of the samples folder, now I can scroll up to the export folder. I can hit enter, and I can go into the folder called chord chains, which was the name of the project that we created these chord chains in. And if I go in there, we've got 3 different samples here on the left. If I can, let's see here. Doesn't want me to preview those for some reason. Oh, I see, because they're folders, not samples. I need to go into each one of those individually, and once I get in there, there's our sample chain, right? So I can preview that if I want to, or I can go add next, and then I can back out of this folder. I can go into the next folder. I can go add next. Now, when it renders these, it just renders them all to the same name, which is just master. It's just the master output that it's rendered when I exported those patterns. Okay, last one, so add. So I've got 3 samples on the right now, and they're all labeled master, which is maybe a little bit confusing. So we're going to go here, and we're just going to change these really fast. Instead of saying master, let's have them say, whoops. Let's have them say 1, rename, and go rename. And then we'll call this one 2, rename, and then hit rename again, and go down and call this one 3, rename. So now I've got samples that are just labeled 1, 2, and 3. And here's where things start to get interesting. What we're going to do now is we're going to slice up all 3 of these samples into individual slices, so that each of the 8 stabs on each of these 3 different sample chains is I can pick which slice of that chain it's playing, okay? So if I hold, whoops, that's not what I want to do. If I hold the menu button, I can go to sample playback, okay? I can make sure that I'm selected on sample 1. And actually, I think I want to bring the volume up on all 3 of these samples just a tiny bit before we get started. So let me hit the menu again, go back to sample editor, and hit normalize, select effect. Let me just like normalize these to maybe like 90%. Yeah. Fantastic. And let me do the same thing with each of these. So it's going to save. Well, my nose is itching again this morning. Sorry, everybody. All right. So I've now got the second sample chain that we created in here. I'm going to select the normalize effect and select 90%, and I'm going to normalize that one. Then I'll select the last sample chain, and we're going to normalize that one to 90% as well. Normalizing is just bringing up the volume. If I have it to 100%, then it brings it up to the absolute 0 dB point with no more headroom left in that sample. And I think that for our purposes here today, 90% will be just fine. So there, I've done that on all 3 of the samples now. So now I can go to the sample playback section. It's going to be saving that sample. Fantastic. I can select sample 1, and I can tell it that I'd like this to be a slice. If I hit this button here that says more, now I can hit slice auto, and I can select the second one, and I can change this over here to playback mode of slice. I can hit the more button, and I can hit slice auto. I can change the sample 3 now. I can go to slice mode. I can hit more, and I can say slice auto. Now, it does a fairly decent job of of putting the slice points in. But you'll notice that as you zoom in, like if we really start zooming in, and like for instance, if I zoom in here really far on like, let's say slice 2 for example, and we're zoomed in like a lot, right? You can see there's actually a little bit of space there between where the sample slice has been embedded and where the sample actually starts. So if you want to be specific about it, you can really get in here and you can quickly just sort of tighten up these not loop points rather, but these sample slice points. And this is another step that's going to take you a few more minutes, but I really think that at the end of the day, the little things like this, they really add up, and it's worth your time to go in here and do this real quick. It's only taking me a second. It's going to add maybe another 2 or 3 minutes to your whole process per se. You can leave it out if you're really desperate about that speed, but I really think that it's something you should just get in here and do as a general rule. If you're slicing samples, just zoom in, get in there, and tighten up those slice points. So we've done that on sample chain 1. Let's do that same thing on sample chain 2. I'm going to select the second slice there, and I'm just going to start zooming in. And then I'm going to start adjusting these slice points right to the beginning of those sounds. I mean, just right in there, super tight, right? Seven. So for those who like to complain about things taking a long time, it's really not that long, to get in there and do this, if you get what I'm saying. Now let's do the last one, okay? This is the third chain that we created. Whoops, I put it wrong. Zoom. Whoops, I'm doing it wrong again. Let's go ahead. What I'm trying to do is zoom in on that first second. There we go. And adjust that right to the start of the sample. Cool. Okay. And since we're going to be playing these back rhythmically, to tighten up the slice start points, it's really nice to just keep everything super tight and, sort of on the grid or swung off the grid really accurately per se. We just take a moment and check the chat. Timing is important. Yeah, it sure is. Half God, half beast knows what's up. All right. Now that I've done all of that, I'm going to go ahead and save this session as a new session as well. Because again, remember, we loaded a new session after the sample chains session. So I'm going to go save, and I'm going to say save, and now we can give this project a name, and let's call this Dub Chord Rhythms, RHYTHMS. Dub chord rhythms. Okay, there we go. So now we'll be able to get back to this particular session, if we need to. Let's go ahead and hit save and let that save. All right. Looks like we've got 12 people watching this morning. Thanks for hanging out with me. I often don't like to announce that I'm going to do these live streams because it, to be honest with you, puts a little bit of stress on me, and I don't really sleep that well the night before. And then sometimes when I'm setting up, especially with this GoPro camera right here, I get a lot of technical issues sometimes and have to swap things around. And if you've announced the stream a day or so, a week or so in advance, and you're just sitting here and the time is passing by, but you can't get the lights right, you can't get the focus on the camera right, and I just get all stressed out and whatever. So a lot of times I just like to, really most of the time, I just like to kind of do these spontaneously. So if you're hanging out for this one, live, I really appreciate you being here. If you're catching this on the replay, I also really appreciate you being here. Okay, we're about to get to the fun part now, though, and thank you for your patience so far. So now we've got the sample chains created and we've got the samples chopped up, okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create like a dub techno-y kind of rhythm. And what I'm going to do is I've got C5 is going to play like just the samples back at their root note, so I can just put that in. And you've got two different effects slots for every single step that you want to put a sound on inside of the tracker or the tracker mini. I'm going to use that first step here to choose slice, and this is going to actually, what I want to do is I want to set the instrument here to make sure that I'm set to instrument number 2, not instrument number 1, not instrument number 3, but instrument number 2. So I'm choosing, this is important here, I shouldn't have skipped over this. So we're choosing the instrument that is in the middle. There's an instrument to the left of this instrument, and there's an instrument to the right. Now, the tracker thinks of any sample as an instrument per se, so even though I've got 8 samples on one sample chain, it's still considering that, you know, that bunch of slices, it's considering that an instrument. And it's important that we select instrument number 2. Now, in the next window here for effect slot number 1, I can choose the slice number, okay? Super boring, right? But so you can see that I can just scroll through those 8 different samples by picking any slice number from 1 to 8. Okay, and we're going to do, let's see here, we're going to create some interesting rhythms here by doing exactly that, making sure that our sound is, our instrument is selected to instrument 2, and that we're going to choose random slices here. Not random slices per se, but different slices. Maybe put one here. And let's choose slice number, maybe 7 this time. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's choose number 6 this time. Slice 6. Okay, and now when I play this back, alright, cool. Now, let's continue on with the second bar. So let's make a second bar of different rhythmic, variations still. I'm going to choose slice again. Let's choose a random slice there. Maybe these 2 here. And choose like slice, yeah, let's say 1 again, and maybe 6 again, and maybe another slice. So I'm just picking different slices. They're all playing back from instrument number 2 at this time. I hope this is making sense of what I'm doing so far. You don't have to get the full picture yet, but I hope you understand at least, how we're creating this so far. Again, if anyone in the chat has any questions, please feel free to ask those. Okay. So we've got already something a lot more interesting than just playing a dubstep with a big chord delay on it. We've got a rhythmic chord pattern that's playing lots of different, timbres and sort of vibes on 8 different chord samples. Now, let's get even more creative, okay? If I press Shift and Insert, we go back to the top of the pattern that I've been working with. And let's put some swing in on some of these, okay? We're going to choose swing as effect slot number 2. So our first effect slot is choosing what slice of the sample we're playing. And then the next slot is going to choose some swing. And I'm just going to go through and arbitrarily put some random swing here on some of these samples, okay? We're also, by default, if I hit Shift and 1, we go to the song arrangement menu, and by default, the tracker loads your project at 130 beats per minute. I really like to write dub techno in some slower tempos, so we're going to change this tempo down to 110 beats per minute. I think I've got a little bit too much swing on some of these samples that I just put in, so we're going to change that from 70 down to 60 on the swing amount. All right. Now we've done quite a bit of work to get to this point where it's spitting out some, semi-interesting sounding, patterns per se, but there's still one more technique, and this is maybe the most important technique that is involved in this whole process, and that's a random instrument effect slot. So that's the reason that we created 3 different sample chains in the beginning, was for this step right here. And this is the reason that we chose instrument number 2 when we put these samples in as well. If I hold down effects 2, it's going to bring up the slots of effects that I can choose from. I can choose things like random note. I can choose things like a chance, like what's the percentage of that step actually even playing. I can choose swing. I can choose panning. I can choose volume. I can choose tuning. All sorts of neat different things that we can use to alter the way that sound is playing on that one step. And here we're going to choose random instrument. And by default, it puts a little I for instrument, and then it puts a 0. And so if I don't change that 0, it's not going to do anything. But what I want is I want to change that 0 to a 1. And what that means is that it's going to choose a random instrument, either one slot back from that sample or one slot forward from that sample. That's why we chose instrument number 2 to play in these. So now when on those ones that I put random instrument with a value of 1, it's going to randomly pick every time it plays through the pattern, whether it picks a slice from sample number 1 or instrument number 1 or instrument number 3. Okay, so that's going to pick a lot more options than just those 8 chord samples from instrument number 2. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now when I play this pattern, it's going to be completely evolving, and it's going to be changing which chords that are being randomly selected every time it plays through the pattern. So I'm trying to give you an example here just that I can show you that every time it plays those first 3 chord stabs, it's going to play a little bit differently. Right? It's a little bit different every time it plays through these. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go one step further, and we're going to go into the instrument menu by pressing 2. I'm going to press 2 again. I'm going to select instrument number 1, and we're going to put a high pass filter on this one. It'd be a pretty dramatic high pass filter too, with a little bit of resonance. Maybe a little bit more dramatic. Yeah. It's playing back. I was waiting for it to play back the full 8 samples, but since we sliced it up, it's only playing sample 1. So we're also going to affect the panning on this sample too. We're going to pan it to the left quite a bit, maybe like 25. Now I'm going to select sample number 3, and we're going to put a low pass filter on this one. Maybe a little bit of resonance on that one as well. And we're going to pan this one maybe about 20 to the right. Maybe a little bit lower on the cutoff. Perfect. Maybe a little bit less resonance and maybe a little bit less volume as well. And what I'm doing by changing these subtle by making these subtle adjustments on those instruments 1 and 3, it's just going to create even more sense of movement. We're going to have some movement in the stereo field now, because if it chooses instrument number 1, it's going to be a little bit to the left side of the stereo field. And if it chooses instrument number 3, it's going to be a little bit on the right-hand side of the stereo field. Instrument number 1 has that high-pass filter. Instrument number 3 has that low-pass filter. So now we're doing a little bit of, work in the frequency range as well. We can immediately hear the difference here. Alright, I like the way that sounds. On the high-pass filter, I want to make it a little bit less dramatic. Now, if you're hearing this on just a phone speaker or just the iPad speaker, you're probably not hearing the stereo width and the movement that's happening in the samples. But if you're listening on headphones or an actual pair of monitor speakers, you can really hear a difference now as we start randomly jumping around in the stereo field here. I'm going to make the panning a little bit less dramatic. Better. So I've made the panning 18 right and 18 left. We're going to go ahead and save this now. So this is our chord rhythms project. And as you can hear, every time it plays that pattern, it spits out a little bit of a different combination. This is all based on what dub chord samples we chose in step 1 of this process. Okay, we've got a few less people watching now because we're getting deep, and a lot of people don't have the patience for these kind of shenanigans. But for those of you who are hanging out, thanks for your time and thanks for watching. Now that we've got this established, what we want to do now is we want to export some loops, because I find if we just leave things constantly evolving, it's sort of hard for the listener to latch on to these things and really get into a groove, a groove that if it's not ever repeating the same groove, it's a little bit harder to get into that groove if it's just constantly moving. So now what we're going to do is we're going to export this exact same pattern maybe like 5 times. So we have 5 different variations of these chord movements, these rhythmic chord movements, okay? So we're going to go export, we're going to go export pattern. I'm going to do this 5 times. Export pattern, that's 2. Export pattern, that's 3. Each time it exports the pattern, it's randomly choosing a little bit different. It's choosing a little bit different on which samples it plays. Export pattern again. And now we're going to go back and we're going to tweak this just a little bit more. We're going to go ahead and adjust the slice numbers. I'm going to change the slice number for every single sample that we've put in. So we've got a little bit more variation happening, and then we're going to render that a few more times. So here I've got slice 8, I'm going to choose 7. Here I've got, I'm just changing it up, you know what I mean? Okay, perfect. So it's playing the same kind of groove, but it's just a little bit different now as we're choosing different samples and different sample slots each time. We're going to hit Shift and 3 to go back to that export menu, and I'm going to export this a few times. Let's say 5 times as well. 3, 4, and 5. So what we've created now is from scratch, provided that you have some dub samples to work with, we've created 10 different rhythmic dub techno chord loops that have a lot more interest in them than just running a single stab through a long echo, right? Now, what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and save at this time. Let's just save. This is so we can get back to here if we want to create more variations or anything like that later. And we're going to start a brand new project now. So it's loading a new project. Hey, what's happening, Ron? Sounds huge on my headphones. Hey, fantastic. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Now you may remember that I said when we load a new project, the tempo defaults to 130 BPM, but I really like to work at, maybe 110 BPM, I think is maybe my favorite tempo for dub techno. So we're going to go shift and 1, and we're going to change that tempo down to 110 beats per minute right off the jump before we get started. I'm also a chronic oversaver, and I encourage you all to be chronic oversavers as well. You never know when something's going to happen. You may get a power fluctuation that flips your unit off, and I don't know about you, but losing the work that I've just spent a half an hour on is like a table flip in bad time for me personally. So I'm kind of a chronic oversaver, and I, always just am saving all the time. So there's no possibility that I'm going to lose the work that I've already put in. So I'm going to go to the save menu, and we're going to save this as a new project. We're going to go, let's call this YouTube Dub Rhythms, RHYTHM. Cool. And save. And there we've got a project, file now, so I can save at any time and make sure we're not losing anything. All right, again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask those in the chat. I know that was pretty complicated what we've started out with, and now we're going to get to actually writing with some of these loops that we've just created. What's happening, Ted? Thanks for tuning in. If I go shift and 2, we get to the sample load menu. And if I go up a couple of folders, we're back in the main export folder. So I can choose the folder with the name of the last project we were working with, which was the Dub Chord Rhythms project. And now here we have 10 folders. Each of those folders has one of those 2-bar loops in it. So we're going to go ahead and start loading those. Add next. And we did all of that work so that we would have some variations to have. This is like, if you're building a full track, you definitely want to mix it up and not have the dub stabs being exactly the same the whole way through, Got to keep the listener interested for sure. Okay, so now we're going to go into number 4, add next. Number 5, add next. Number 6, add next. This is going to allow us to create like different sections and different, vibes on those sections in the track that we're putting together. I find that the memory in the Tracker Mini is plentiful. We're barely, we're only at 8% so far. Add next. Add next. Add next. So we're loading all 10 of these loops, and we may not, use all of these 10 loops in our session, and we're probably not going to get to using all 10 of these loops today, but this is how I would do it so that I've got the option. So loading all of these in has given us, 13% of the memory used up. We have a total of 48 sample slots per project, and we've just used 10 of them. Not that big of a deal, really. What I am going to do, though, is because I have 10 samples now that are just all labeled master, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense if you're trying to know what you're doing. So I always take the time to label things correctly. Again, I know that gets under people's skin, and a lot of people just fly by the seat of their pants and don't label anything ever, and that's fine if you work that way, but I just can't work that way. So we're going to go ahead and take a moment and label these 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, rename 3, rename 5, rename. I know some people think of this kind of stuff as tedious, but it really isn't taking up all that much time. We started less than an hour ago, and I've been going really slow and explaining every step of the way. I mean, I don't find this to be all that tedious, to be honest with you. It goes a lot faster if I'm not sitting here teaching at the same time. And 9, and then Lastly, 10. And this is what I mean about being a chronic oversaver. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and save the project again. Hey, what's happening, Bunny? Thanks for tuning in. What's happening, Peter? What's happening, Alex? All right. Now what we're going to do is let's just take a listen to one of these dub loops and see what we've got. I like kind of arranging my tracks the same way over and over again in the different projects that I use, that I create rather, in the Tracker and in the Tracker Mini. I like to leave tracks 1, 2, and 3 available for drums. I'm liking to put a bass line on channel 4, and then I'll usually use tracks 5, 6, and 7 for melodic content, and track 8 for my effects content. Now, you don't have to do it that way. The beauty of the Tracker is that you can put any sound on any step of the pattern that you decide to put it on, but each track is a mono track. So if you put like a crash cymbal that you want to ring out on step 1, you can't put more samples, right after that, because they'll cut off that sample that you wanted to trail out. So that's something to keep in mind. So here we're going to put in, let's just put in instrument number 1, which is going to be the first loop that we put together. Before we go any further, I do want to normalize the volume of these samples. I find that for some reason, I'm going to go into sample editor and make sure I'm picking sample. I find that for some reason when you export the patterns, they export a little bit lower in volume than maybe what you were actually expecting, and that's fine. It's probably so they leave a little bit of headroom or whatever. But I really like to make sure that we've got lots of volume out of these. So I'm going to go through all 10 of these, and I'm going to just normalize them to maximize the volume on each individual sample. Let's do it on sample. It saves each sample into the project as you do this, so that takes a little bit more time. But I definitely think it's worth, getting your levels up to snuff at the very beginning, so you don't have to fuss with that. And later on as you're working. And select and apply, choosing instrument number 6. Again, so it's calling these all instruments, but that's just each sample that you load, it considers it to be an instrument. Select effect, whether it doesn't discern whether it's a loop or a one shot or any of those kind of things. Did I do this one already? Cool. Whoops. Choose 8, select, and apply. Sometimes when I'm talking and teaching, I get a little bit mixed up. I think that's bound to happen. Thanks for your patience. Cool. Select, apply, and the last one. So that really didn't take that long just to normalize these 10 samples, right? Now, if we wanted to, we could go through and chop these up into any kind of slices we want. You're basically just groups of, and they're all just a little bit different as to what chords are playing, where they're at in the stereo field, whether they maybe have a high pass or a low pass filter, to get a little bit more interest than, again, just playing a dub stab with some delay on it. You know what I mean? So here, we've already put one in. Right on. I hope that you can hear that there's some movement in the stereo field there. I'm going to bring the volume down just a touch as we start actually working with some dubby techno stuff. And again, if you've got any kind of samples, that's fine, but we're going to be working with my Dub Spectrum sample pack today because it's a huge pack. I made all the samples. I love these samples. They're easy to work with. So we're going to hit Shift and 2 to get back into our sample loading menu, and we are going to scroll down to the first available sample slot. And we are going to go into the samples folder, then the Electronisounds folder, then the Dub Spectrum folder. And if I got tons, there's like thousands of samples in this in this sample pack that are appropriate for dub techno music. Let's go down to this folder of kick loops with pumping reverb on them and just get started, right? Let's just start previewing some of these. I'm sure that's pretty perfect right there, but for the purposes of fun, let's just scroll through a few more. Ooh, I like that too. Ooh, man, that's fat. Ooh. That's really chunky. Sometimes it's hard to choose because I know I'm going to be hearing this kick loop for like a long time. Ooh. That sounds pretty nice. Let's go ahead and load that one. I'm going to add that into the project. And then it's going to add that. By default, it's going to input whatever instrument was the last instrument you just loaded. So I don't even need to worry about that. I can just press up on the plus key here and it immediately will just put that sample in. These are 1-bar loops, the kick loops, so I need to put it in twice to match the length of our dub chord loop. Now our dub chord loop is really loud compared to that kick loop, so I'm going to bring the volume on these down now. I know I just normalized them all, but I'd rather normalize it and turn the volume down than have to crank the volume up. That sounds pretty good. Now let's get some cool movement happening on that dub chords loop to keep, pushing ourselves in that movement direction. That's the key here. I want you to really take away from that. Is we're trying to create like our own universe with these chord samples instead of just, dun 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 dun. That's the same every time. We really want movement in these sounds. So the first thing let's do is let's assign a low pass filter to that chord loop. Let's bring the resonance up a little bit, just a little, maybe 15, and the cutoff to about 80. Now if I hit number 2 again, it's going to get us into the second page of the sound design menus here. I can go down to the cutoff, for example, and I can assign that to an LFO so that we get a little bit of movement happening on that knob without us having to touch anything. Let's just start pressing play here. By default, it sets to a nice triangle waveform, which is just kind of a smooth up and down. You can change the amount of steps. Let's start off with 96 steps, so it's not like perfectly moving over 8 bars, but a little bit different. And I'm just listening now to the filter and cutoff, how much it's moving on this loop. Maybe bring it down a little bit less so it's not quite as dramatic. But I want to hear that movement, right? We're going to do the same thing now with panning so that our mix starts moving a little bit in the stereo field, right? Our loop, rather, not our mix. So if I select panning on this sound and I select LFO, maybe I'll choose 48 steps and I'll just subtly put a little bit of panning movement on that loop sound. So now we're kind of moving just ever so gently now in the stereo field and in the frequency spectrum with that filter. Hey, Dub Station 0, thanks for hanging. All right, what's happening, Russ? Thanks for tuning in, man. Cool. Now what I want to do is I want to put even more movement on these chords by adding a little bit of effect to them, okay? So if I go back to the first screen of the editing instruments, I can go back and forth between the two different pages of sample editing with just hitting the number 2 button. So now I'm going to hit more and I'm going to crank that reverb up. Now we've got a global reverb send and a global delay send in the tracker and in the tracker mini. Now that I've cranked up the amount of reverb, it's set to -4 dB. I'm going to hit Shift and 4, or rather not Shift and 4, but just 4 to go to the pages of the master section of the tracker here, and I can adjust the reverb settings here. So I can bring that size up a little bit. Maybe we'll bring that up to 65. I could take the damping down just a little bit so the reverb trails out a little bit more. I'll bring that to 40. I can take the pre-delay and bring that up to 60, so there's a little bit more time between when the sound hits and when the reverb actually kicks in. And I'm going to bring the diffusion up to 90 so the reverb is a little thicker sounding. Yeah, that sounds cool. Hope you guys can hear everything okay and that I'm not exploding anyone's phone yet. Alright. Let's do the same thing and add a little bit of delay to that chord stab loop now. I'm going to crank it up so we can really hear what that delay is doing. And by default, it's not really synced to tempo the way I'd like it to be. So if I hit 4 to go to the master section, I can affect those delay settings. I'd like to turn the ping pong on. I'd like to turn the sync on. And maybe we'll try, 3/2. Bring the feedback up and the filter amount down. Let's try that. I'm going to keep the rate of the delay on 1. I think that sounds pretty good. And now we're just going to turn the amount of delay sent down on that sample. Alright, so we've got lots of effect happening on that sound now. Lots of movement. It's moving in the stereo field. It's also moving in the frequency spectrum. Might be a little bit too loud now. Thanks, Russ. I appreciate that. How's that sounding to everyone? Are we sounding? Can you still hear that kick drum? Is the chords loop too loud? What do you think? Let's go ahead and add another layer now. If we go back to my Dub Spectrum folder, we can find something else to load. Maybe like a hat loop. I have a folder full of hat loops. I'm just trying to be quick about it now since we're live on the stream. Let's go ahead. We're at 110 BPM. Ooh, that's almost perfect right there. Let's just load the first one. That was just quick and easy. That's the point I'm trying to get across, is that this sample pack in particular is really quick and easy to work with. If you're working with a different sample pack, then I hope that one is easy for you to work with as well. Let's go ahead and go add, and we'll add that hats loop to the project. We're going to go back to the arrangement screen here. I'm going to hit Shift and Insert to get us to the top. By default, it picks the most recent sample you've loaded. It's just a 1-bar loop, really straightforward. Alright, let's add a little bit of effect and movement to those hi-hats, shall we? Bring the volume on those down just a little bit. And let's go ahead and add some movement in the stereo field to that hi-hat loop. Just a little bit, like 13, for example. Maybe even less, just 11. A tiny, all these details add up to a really, well-rounded track. Let's add a little bit of reverb to those hats and some delay. Thanks, Ron. let's do the same thing with these hi-hats that we did with the chord loop. Let's get some filter movement happening on them as well. Assigning a low-pass filter. And to the cutoff on that sound, I'm going to assign an LFO. We're going to leave it at 128 steps. And I'm going to adjust the amount. So we just hear that loop kind of moving a little bit, but not like fading out completely. Nice. I'm going to bring the volume down on that some more. If we hit the number 4, we can get back to our effects setting page. We can also get to our master mixer section and make sure that none of our tracks are clipping or turning red, you know, hitting too loud a volume. You can see our master volume over here is in line as well. I can even turn that up a little bit actually. It's all about the details. Yeah, Russ knows what time it is. It's hard to tell on these live streams when I'm mixing on headphones how the levels are. Are those hi-hats too loud maybe? Maybe we bring them down one more click. Just let me know what you think about the mix of these 3. We only have 3 tracks going. Let's go ahead and save at this time. Something I really like about the tracker and the Tracker Mini is that I don't even need to press stop to save. So if I'm just in, you know, that zone, I can just keep it playing. Let's add another element to this, shall we? I'm going to pick the next available sample slot. Let's pick a different folder of samples. I've got a folder of some sample long atmospheres here we can check out. Oh, that's freaking sick. We're definitely choosing that one. We're just, see, that's how easy it is to use. I'm not even like sitting here, you know, if you're using sample packs, a lot of time you'll sit there and scroll through like 50 samples until one sounds good or whatever. I spend like so much time when I'm creating my packs to make sure that that's not the case, that it's really easy to just find what you're looking for. I look at sample packs like Sonic Lego pieces, and I want every piece to go with every other piece, and for you to be able to create things that you enjoy and that you like creating and that are fun to create. Not a struggle to sit there and go through like 1,000 samples just to find something that kind of works. Okay, so when you highlight a sample in the load menu, it's going to show you, you know, what amount of memory you're going to take up if you load that sample. So it's going to take up quite a bit of memory. These are long atmospheres, and we want that nice, long, evolving atmosphere. But I still have plenty of sample time left in the memory, so we don't have to worry about, oh no, you know, we're filling it up too fast or anything like that. I've never had a problem with filling up the Tracker Mini sample too fast. If I go back to the arrangement page, I said earlier that I often like to put the effects sounds on track 8, and I would consider like a nice Atmos definitely as an effect sound. If we hear that sound plain, it's kind of got like a low pad sound or some vinyl crackle in this sample as well. Kind of some animal jungle ambient noises in the background as well. Really layered, and the pad sound is gently evolving in the background as those, you know, sort of bird noises are happening. I think this is fantastic. We're going to go ahead and put a little bit of a high pass filter on this sound as well. We're going to bring it down in the mix a little bit. I'm also going to go to the More page and put a little bit of reverb and a little bit of delay just to kind of get it in the same stereo acoustic space as the rest of the sounds. Yeah, awesome. And we're going to do with this what we've been doing with everything else. We're going to give it a little bit more movement by hitting that number 2 again to get to the page where we can adjust the panning. I'm going to assign an LFO to the panning. We're going to maybe put that at 96, so it's really gently and slowly panning back and forth, and ever just the tiniest amount here. We're going to go with like 10. Not a big dramatic shift that you're going to be like, you know, feeling like you're getting woozy, but just enough to keep that space and everything feeling a little bit alive, right? Now that we've done all that, we're going to go ahead and hit save. Hey, what's up, Ted? It is the Dub Spectrum sample pack that I created. It's available at electronisounds.com, and there's just thousands and thousands of loops, chords, drum sounds, drum loops, percussion loops, anything you could need at all for creating any kind of dub techno music. It also has, I think, like 17 or 18 projects for the tracker, and that will also load into the OG tracker and the tracker mini. Now, don't be confused by sample packs, though, that are specifically for the tracker. If you don't have a tracker, these are just samples that's involved in these packs. You won't be able to load the projects into, say, if you're using an MPC Live or an Akai Force or a Digitac or something like that, but you can definitely load the samples into anything that will load samples, no matter what you're using, including Ableton Live or, DAWs on the iPad like Logic or Beatmaker 3, for example, GarageBand. Anything that'll load samples will, because there's no synthesizers inside of the Polyend trackers. It just loads samples. So at the end of the day, these are just regular samples. Alright, so let's go ahead and actually before I put that sound in, right now we've got a 2-bar loop, but the tracker and the tracker mini will go up to 128 step loops, so 8-bar loops. If I go to the more page here, and we can go duplicate pattern, duplicate pattern, duplicate pattern, until it says pattern is too long to go any further. That's stretched it out now to a full 8 bars. It's taken our 2 bars, it duplicated that into a 4-bar pattern, and then it duplicated that into an 8-bar pattern without me having to go in and rewrite all the individual steps that we've already written. And now I can place in that long evolving pad sound, which by default is too loud. I want to tuck that pad sound way in the background, right? So that it doesn't override the chord rhythm that's happening here. I'm going to put a little more high pass on it to give some more, room in the spectral frequency for our chords. Cool, and let's go ahead and save at this time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can create kind of like a fake sidechain compression effect on that background pad to kind of pump up and down a little bit in volume with the kick drum and add just that little bit more of a rhythmic groove element to our groove here. If I go to that page 2, making sure that I'm still selected on that long pad sample. If I go to the volume setting over here, I can set that to be affected with an envelope. No, not an envelope, a LFO. And what I want to do is I want to set that to a reverse saw shape, if I'm not mistaken. And if I'm not mistaken, I want this to be every 4 steps, which would be quarter notes. And let's hear it really dramatically by default. If I go back to our main page, I can delete, I can mute rather the chords loop. So we're just hearing now and I can mute the hi-hat. So we're just hearing the kick drum and that sort of atmosphere sample. And I just want to hear that it's pumping the way I expect it to be pumping per se. It's not. It's pumping the opposite way that I'd like it to be pumping. So what let's try a saw wave. And there we have it. If I adjust the amount, we can really get it pumping a lot. And what this does is it's ducking down the volume every time. I'm reversing it's ducking down the volume every time that kick drum is hitting and pushing it up in between the spaces. So it gives room. It not only creates that pumping, sort of vibe, that rhythmic pump, but it's giving room for that kick to kind of exist and punch through without having to compete with the pad to do it. We can make it really subtle if we want. I think I'm going to go with 75 for the amount here. I think I'm going to put a little bit more reverb and a little bit more delay on that atmosphere in the background as well. So we can hear it, but it's not overwhelming. And now if I bring back the hi-hats, Yeah, oh God, Russ is talking about rhythm and stealth. Oh man, there's a track on there. I think it's track number 2. Oh my God, Fat Planet. I think it's called DIC. Oh my gosh, that left field, rhythm and stealth. If you haven't heard that album, holy crap, hear that album. Whoo, that album is just magic. Oh my gosh, Russ got me getting goosebumps now. All right, so here we've got all the tracks going again. I think our chords loop might be a little bit too loud in the mix. I think there might be a little more room for a little bit more volume on the atmosphere sound. I think we can maybe pump it a little more. How's that sounding? Is the dub chords, are they too loud? Hard to tell on these headphones, so if I'm making your phone melt, then I apologize. Might be a little bit loud overall. Hey, what's happening? AD Vision. Thanks for tuning in. So let's go ahead and save everything we've done at this time. Running out of coffee. Let's see if we can get a percussion loop into the mix here. Maybe bring that hi-hat loop down just a tiny little bit more. Go back to the sample loading screen, pick the first available slot. And we're still in the Dub Spectrum sample pack here. And I've got a folder with a whole bunch of percussion loops in it. Start checking some of those out. See if we can find something that we like. That's nice. I'm going to go ahead and stop for a quick answer to this question here. What do I think of the Play? I absolutely love the Play. I have the Play and I have the Play Plus. It's one of my absolute favorite devices to work with. I've done 40 now, count them, 40 individual sound banks for the Play and the Play Plus. So if you're in need of new sounds and new inspiration for your Play or your Play Plus, please check those out at Electronisounds.com. They are exactly as the factory content, and they will work with all of the Play's fill functions as well. 40 new packs for the Play and the Play Plus I've put together. I absolutely love the Play. I'm actually a Polyend fanboy. If you haven't noticed, I've got the Tracker Mini, I've got the Tracker, I've got their Eurorack module, the Poly 2, I've got the Play, I've got the Play Plus. It just goes on like this. That was good. Ooh, that's cool too. Let's go ahead and load that one. It's kind of a, what is that like? Kind of like a shaker sound almost. Yeah, it is like shakers. Cool. We're going to bring the volume down on those, and we're going to put a low pass filter on those. Going to tuck them in the mix, tuck them back in the mix a little rather. Put a little bit of reverb and delay on these. Cool. And let's go ahead and put that in the arrangement as well. Let's put that on track 3. Again, I was saying earlier that I really like to save tracks 1, 2, and 3 for drums and percussion. Track 4 I'll often use for the bass. Track 5, 6, and 7 I'll use for melodic elements. And then track 8 I'll use for some effects and whatnot. Now I believe this is just a 1-bar shaker loop, so I'm going to go through and put this on the down. It's hard to see with this giant camera in my face all the time, but we do our best here on these live streams. Thanks for your patience. So I'm just going through now and I'm putting this on the downbeat of every measure. All right. Just a little something to kind of give some extra texture in that high frequency range. And I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pan the hi-hats and the shakers a little bit left and a little bit right to go ahead and widen our stereo field a little. Let's go ahead and take the hi-hats and pan them 6. And let's take the percussion now and add it to the right 6. So we've spread our stereo field out just a little bit more and helped those sounds to have their own space in the mix so they're not necessarily fighting with each other for that same frequency range. Yeah, Ted knows what's up. That whole album is just absolutely magic. That's their second album, Left Field, Rhythm and Stealth. Woo! And let's take a moment to do the same thing that we've been doing with everything else. Let's move a little bit of like movement in that stereo field on that percussion loop as well. So if I go to the panning and I assign that to an LFO and we bring that down to just a very subtle amount again, maybe like 10, and I change the steps. If I just leave everything at the same step count, our whole mix will start doing this like in time with itself. But if I keep choosing different amount of steps that things are going to happen in, then everything just kind of starts going like this, you know what I mean? And we get lots and lots of movement in the stuff, and that's really what I'm after. Let's do the same thing with the cutoff. I had low pass filtered the shakers just a little bit to kind of shave off a tiny bit of the high frequencies on those. I'm going to assign a very subtle cutoff on that, and I'm going to assign that to like a different number as well. Let's make that 12 steps, for example. I'm not choosing just, an even number that's going to happen every single bar and be super predictable. I'm trying to get everything kind of moving and flowing. Cool. Let's put a little bit more reverb and a little bit more delay on that shaker. And tuck it back in the mix even more. Let's go ahead and save what we've done at this time. And I think what we'll do next is add maybe like a clap sound. This is something that I'm not in agreement with a lot of, with a lot of dub techno producers on. And that is, a lot of people, when they're producing dub techno, don't think it's okay to put the clap on the 4 and the 5 rather, and the 13. They don't like to do that. They find it's like too predictable sounding and it gets you out of the dub techno zone or something like that. But I'm here to say that you should do whatever, floats your boat, and you shouldn't worry about what other people are doing. You should definitely do what you want to do. And I like to put the clap on the 5 and the 13. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to just play the groove here, and I'm going to scroll through some clap sounds from the Dub Spectrum pack and find something that hopefully slots into the groove that we're creating. Here we go, clap one shots. I really like to make, big sample packs full of a lot of samples. There's like 100 clap samples in this folder. Obviously, you're not going to need that many unless you're just writing dub techno every day for the rest of your life. But this way you can really scroll through the sounds and find something that you really think fits the vibe that you're creating. I like number 17. Yeah, I think that's the one. We're going to go ahead and add that. Sorry about my nose being so itchy today. I feel like a weirdo. Ugh, sorry guys. I'm telling you, no matter how, no matter how much you've got your shit together, jumping on a live stream and being on camera will immediately reveal all the weird little inconsistencies and desire to touch yourself everywhere and scratch yourself and look like a total weirdo. It happens every time. I'm not going to worry about bass at all in this jam today, so I'm going to go ahead and put the clap on track 4, where I would normally save that for the bass. And I'm just going through and putting that on, every other spot here. In our 8-bar pattern. All right. It's definitely too loud, so we're going to bring the volume down on that clap. I don't want it to be super prevalent. I'm not making like banging techno. We're going to low pass filter it just a little bit. And I'm going to give it a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay. I'm not going to pan the clap. I'm going to keep the clap and the kick drum dead center. We'll save again at this point. So we got 10 people hanging out on the stream. Thanks for joining me and being here today, everyone. We've got a pretty interesting groove going. And we've got 2 tracks still that don't have any sounds on them at all. So let's bring in a ride cymbal maybe to really help spark that top end. Let's go to the loading screen. Let's pick the first available sample slot. And I've got a folder of ride loops here. Cool. That's nice and thick. Oh my god. Really plain though. Yeah, I like the way that one adds some texture at the top of the frequency spectrum. So let's add that. So far, we've used up 16 of the total available sample slots per project, so tons more room to load a ton more sounds. We've only used 35% of the available sample memory, so still tons more room to load lots more samples into a project like this. Don't forget, we've got all 10 of those loops that we created in the beginning of this session, all loaded here and ready to go. I'm saying all of this to just get across that I don't see any reason that you're going to max out like the sampling time or the amount of sample slots that we've got on unless you're trying to create a full long like 2-hour set in like one project, which I don't really recommend. You're not going to run out of space using the Tracker Mini. I absolutely love this unit. That's about, I think, a 2-bar loop. Yep. So we're going to go ahead and put in that loop every 2 bars. We're going to bring the volume down on that ride, tuck it back in the mix. Because we already have 2 other tracks kind of existing in that same frequency spectrum. Let's give it a little bit of movement in the stereo field by assigning an LFO to that sound. If anyone hears that the stream is distorting, are we sending out too much level to the stream? It's hard to tell sometimes because OBS is a liar when it comes to the level. But let me know if we're distorting the volume, if anyone can hear that. Thanks, guys. So just a tiny little bit of movement happening on that ride cymbal. Maybe tuck it back in the mix even more. It's hard to tell on the headphones. Sometimes when I watch these streams back, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have mixed everything differently, you know. Still maybe less volume on that ride. Rides have a way of really cutting through the mix. They're really clean and really just... And I certainly don't want to make sure we've left enough space for those chords to be jumping around. Alright. Let's put an extra kick drum in at the end of every 8 bars. Cool. And bring the volume down on that by choosing effects and adjusting the velocity on that step so it's a little bit lower in volume. Perfect. So just a little bit of a boom, boom, boom at the end of our pattern to kind of help us keep pushing forward. I still worry that the ride might be a little bit too loud. Thanks, Russ. So I really want to get this across. Even though we created that chord rhythm using a lot of randomness, it's still a repeating pattern, and every 2 bars it's doing the exact same thing again. So I still feel that it's really easy to like lock into the groove that that's putting down. And I can't stress this enough. We have 10 different variations of that chord loop. So right now I'm just trying to fill up all 8 tracks inside the tracker, but then we can start doing some variations, and that's going to happen really quickly because we took the time in the beginning to create those 10 different variations on the chord loop. I'm trying to think what we want to put on the last remaining track here. On track 6, I don't have anything yet. You can transpose parts on the fly. If you go to the menu, there's a performance screen, and you can actually assign certain tracks to tuning, and then you can, do a whole bunch of performance on the fly. You can assign any of your tracks to any of these different things you want, like changing volume, changing panning, changing tuning, changing the low pass cutoff, the high pass cutoff, or the band pass cutoff, the delay send amount, the reverb send amount, where the sample is hitting in the position of that sample. Like you can move the playhead around on your samples in real time. You can change the sample start or end point. You can change the volume of the LFO speed, all sorts of interesting things that you can do. I don't actually use the performance mode on the trackers really all that much because I'm really like things to be predictable and know when things are going to happen, and typically I'll just program those kind of changes directly into my patterns themselves. So then when I'm arranging out the song in the song mode, I'll just arrange those patterns to play back in whatever order I see fit. But you can actually interact quite a bit with it in real time. I don't know if I just saved, so let's make sure we get a save in here. And I think we might want to try for another melodic element on track 6. Because we have quite a bit of drums and movement happening there. Might be nice to get like one of those long, big floaty stabs to happen over everything else that's already going on. It might not be super easy because that's kind of taking the same room in the frequency spectrum as our rhythmic chord loop, but let's give that a go. If I go back to the folder of dub chord stabs where we got our original samples from to create these rhythmic loops, if I pick the first empty slot here and just play the groove and then preview some of these chord stabs, I can see if maybe something will sort of slot into the vibe we're creating here. Might be a good time to look for one of those that's in an octave higher than most of the chord samples that we've got. In fact, I know there was one earlier that like that there, that's a whole octave up. That'll work fine. Let's go ahead and load that into the project. Cool. And what I'm going to do is, let's see here. Do I want it to hit right on the downbeat or maybe on the upbeat? Don't you down, down. Yeah, that's dope. Let's put it in every 4 bars. Cool. Let's add some just a ton of reverb and a ton of delay on that. Oh, hell yeah. Maybe run a high pass filter on it just a little bit, or maybe actually run a low pass filter on this. And then like we've been doing with everything else, let's put an LFO on that chord stab so that every time it hits, it's moving a little bit in the stereo field and in the filter frequency spectrum. If I go to page 2, we can adjust the panning and assign that to an envelope. Cool, now we're getting a lot of stereo movement on that. We go down to the cutoff and assign that to an LFO. Actually, I think I want to make that like 96. We should now be hearing some filter happening. I'll make that even more extreme. Make sure we can really hear that. Yeah, there we go. Let's bring it down in volume a little. We're going to max out the reverb and the delay on that stab so it's as big as possible. Yeah, I think we could bring it down in volume a little more. What do you guys think about that new stab? Is it too loud? Maybe a little too loud still? Want just the tiniest bit more movement on that filter sweeping. Yeah, maybe even more. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Listening just to that new stab sound. Here I was really tucked in the back that time. So if I go over to our main master volumes screen here, we can see all the levels of the individual tracks. See that nothing's hitting too hard, nothing's peaking. We can take a look at our master here, which still has some room in it. I can bring that up a little bit as well. Alright, and let's save what we've got going here. So now that we've taken the time to create those synth chord rhythmic loops in the very beginning of the stream, and then we've taken the time to go really quickly through some samples of my Dub Spectrum sample pack and get a groove going, now it'll be really fast and really easy to start creating some kind of interesting arrangement happening and get it sounding more like a song and less like an 8-bar loop. How are we going to do that? Well, the very first thing let's do is go back to the arrangement screen, hit more, and then we can choose copy pattern. Okay, now we hit more until we get our pattern number back in the left, and I can choose pattern number 2 now. I can hit more and I can paste that pattern into pattern number 2. I can also do the same thing again, bring it up to pattern number 3 and paste that pattern. So now we've got pattern 1, 2, and 3 all exactly the same. So I can go back to pattern number 1 and remove a lot of these elements so that it's more of an intro and not the full caboodle happening at the same time, at the just right off the jump. That's right, caboodle. So let's see here. We've got, let's see, like a ride on track 7. So I can go through and delete that ride. It happens every 2 bars, so we'll need to delete that a couple of times so it doesn't trigger at all. Okay, and then maybe we'll take out the big chord stab, so that's more something we can bring in a moment and leave that out from the intro. I think the intro might be good if we start with basically just the sort of pumping atmosphere sound and the chord sample. Track 4 is the clap, so we can get rid of that for sure. We don't need that in the intro of our track. And because I'm clearing sounds as well, this is also giving us space that if we wanted to, we could load more sounds to happen just in the intro part of the song, because we've got space to put those now. It's sort of up to us if we want to leave the percussion and or the hi-hats and stuff going. Let's hear what this sounds like. So I think it sounds really good with just the hi-hat and the sort of shaker percussion loop, but I like a bit of a kick accent to happen as well sometimes. I don't think we need that in the intro here though, so let's go ahead and delete all of the kick drums from our intro pattern as well. Okay, fantastic. So we've got an 8-bar sort of intro pattern now. Now, if we go to pattern number 2, everything is back. Let's see what happens if I mute that kick drum. Let's go ahead and I'm trying to think of how we want to progress this in. I think what we'll do. Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and delete the clap from pattern number 2, so we still have that to bring in, so we're not introducing all of the elements right at once. And I think we're going to go ahead and remove that big chord stab from this pattern as well. But now we've got the kick drum coming in, for example. And I think we took out the ride on pattern number 1. So if we go Shift and 1, that gets us into the song arrangement screen. By default, these add slot controls are blacked out, grayed out. So if I click the record button, I can add, let's say, a couple more slots, so now we have a total of 4 slots. And if I go to the top, we can adjust what pattern is playing in what slot. So remember, pattern 3 now is our full pattern. So if I go pattern 1, pattern 2, and then pattern 3 twice, that's going to give us a little bit of an intro. That's going to give us a little bit more stuff happening, and then that's going to give us our full pattern happening. Let's go ahead and add 2 more slots and make these pattern 4, but we haven't created a pattern 4 yet, so let's do that. And this will be really quick, okay? Pattern 3 is our main pattern where everything is, all the meat is there. So if I go copy pattern 3, and if I paste that into, paste that into pattern 4, the only thing I really need to change here is, like, say, a couple of things. I can take out, like, the ride loop, for example, which I believe, just for some variation, because we've just heard the ride for the last 2 sets of 8 bars, so the ride has been going for the last 16 bars. I can take that out. We can go over here, we can remove the clap, so that will stop playing. And now is where we can start using all of the other variations that we put together in the beginning of the stream on the synth part. Okay, so for example, I can have it play instrument number 5 instead of instrument number 1. It's a completely different, part as well. But we'll need to make the settings on instrument number 5 the same as the settings on instrument number 1. So we've got a volume of -672. I'm going to mimic that. I'm going a little bit fast now. 672. Okay. I'm going to go to instrument back to 1, go to more, and I've got the reverb and delay set to -4 and -16. Do the same thing on instrument number 5 now. -4, -16. Okay, so now we've got those set the same. If we go back also to the second page here, instrument number 1 does have a automation, happening on the cutoff. Let's do the same thing to instrument number 5. 96 steps, 36. So low pass. On LFO, 96 steps, 36 amount. So we're just kind of duplicating those settings so we don't hear a lot of, weird stuff happening with that loop. I believe we had some panning automation going on the first loop as well. We do. Triangle, 48 steps, 16 amount. Let's do that same thing. Triangle, 40, it's a 48 steps and amount 16. If it's a little different, that's fine, but I just want to kind of keep these things in the ballpark of each other. And lastly, I want to make the cutoff amount the same, which was 80. And do we have any resonance? Yeah, 15. Let's change that to 15 here as well. So now what we've got is we've got on pattern 5, if I'm not mistaken, we've got, this is pattern 4 rather, not 5, but pattern 4. We've got the same groove happening, but the chords are doing a different. We can probably even take out that big chord stab now as well. Whoops. We can probably even take out that big chord stab here as well because we're changing the rhythmic dub chord. All right, and that sounds like this. A little bit. Let's go ahead and save all of those adjustments that we just made. Sorry if that was too fast, but I'm just trying to go quickly because we've been going for almost 2 hours at this point, and I know these can get a little bit tedious to sit through sometimes. All right. Hey, thanks, Ted. I appreciate that. Before we hear it in its entirety, though, let's add one more element to the mix to really sort of announce to the listener that a change is taking place on pattern number 4 as we're swapping out those 2 chord grooves. All right, let's add an impact, a crash type of sound. So that really just, helps the listener understand that this is a new section here. So I'm going to choose an empty sample slot. And we're going to go to, let's see here. Somewhere here I've got a folder of Dean's Effect Stash. It's cool. There we go. And this is not in the Dub Spectrum pack, rather, but this is just some other samples that I really like to use. And this sample is actually in just about every sample pack I've ever put out. It's just a kind of a noise crash sound, and it just sort of works. So we're going to grab that. You could use a regular crash cymbal or any noise, impact, burst type of sound that you like. And here on pattern 4, we're going to go ahead and put that in on track 7 where the ride was originally, so that when I play the pattern on the downbeat, it's going to go, to help the listener identify that we're changing things up. I'm going to put a little bit of a high pass on that and a lot of reverb and a lot of delay. Bring it down in the mix. 2, 3, 4. Bring it down in the mix a little more. All right, and we're going to save at this time as well. Cool. Yeah, I actually like the maybe for a more dramatic of a change in this section, we can also, whoops, we can also take out those hi-hats. So I'm going to delete the hi-hats and just leave the background shaker happening. So even more, a little bit of change up than just the chords changing up here. Okay, so basically we've already got a little bit of a song, you know, started here. We've got an intro, then we add a few more things, then we add kind of like everything, and then we, you know, do that for a little bit, and then we change everything up. Let's go ahead and listen to this in its entirety and see what we've created in the last, you know, less than 2 hours here. Here comes the big change in the chord loop. In 1, 2. Cool. Let's go ahead and save at this time. And then let's go ahead and now I'm just in the, you know, songwriting mode per se, using the samples that we created, starting to make more variations. If anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to ask those in the chat. I'm going to go for a little bit longer today and just keep writing on this part. I've already got an idea of what we could do. What we could do is we could take pattern 4 and we could copy that. We could put that into pattern, whoops, we could put that into pattern. What's happening there? Why is it doing that? Cool. We could put that into pattern 5, paste. And what I want to do is I want to chop up the chord sample variation, which is instrument number 5. Okay, so if I go back to the sample loading menu, I can easily copy and paste any of the samples in our sample pool, for lack of a better way to say that, and I can paste that into a different slot so that I can mess with that and create a different variation of it without altering the first instance of it in the sample pool. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to go ahead and rename this, and what I want to do is I'm going to call this 5-chopped, and we're going to chop up this chord sample, this rhythmic chord pattern. Okay, so 5 chopped. So now I know that this is going to be the version of that sample that's chopped up. It's just that simple. We're going to hold menu. We're going to go to sample playback. I've got sample slot 19, which is 5 chopped, and I'm going to go put that into slice mode, and I'm going to add some slices here. And let's see here. What I want to do is add another slice and maybe just adjust that one. I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'm just sort of messing around and adding some slices here so that we've got some, different sections of that loop that I can trigger and play it back, in a different rhythmic pattern than the default rhythmic pattern. So if I start zooming in here, we can make sure that I've got these slices really tight on the transients of the sound. Cool. And zoom in a little more and get really tight in there. Cool. And one more that I put in and adjust that one. Cool. So now we've got 4 different, little chopped up sections of this loop. They're not, specifically even or anything like that. Let's go ahead and do a save at this time as well. So we can create a variation of that pattern. So when it plays, it's just not the same exact thing for 16 bars, but keeps the listener's interest and keeps things moving and keeps things kind of going like this, for lack of a better way to describe it. All right. So if we go back into the arrangement page, now if I choose instrument number 19 instead of instrument number 5, and let's see, it was an 8-bar loop, I believe, so I don't need to do that. Or was it a 2-bar loop, actually? Yeah, it was. So I'm going to delete the other triggers from happening on that track. Cool. And then now I can choose what slice number of those 4 slices that we just created. I can choose what slice I want to play back there. And let's choose the second slice, for example. Cool, that'll work. And then let's put something in on the down of the 3rd bar here. Slice number, let's choose slice number 4. Ooh, that's just a really quick hitter. So maybe put another one in here. Now I'm just experimenting, right, with those slices that we created. Let's in fact copy that and put that in again. Whoops, that didn't quite work the way I was expecting. So I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to highlight all 4 bars of these. Actually, let's make it a little bit more interesting before I do that. Be slice 1. Yeah, let's put slice number 4 in again here, because it's just that singular slice. Maybe bring the pitch down a couple, and maybe the volume a little lower on that one. Yeah, now we're talking. And let's make this a little more interesting here as well. Slice. Just trying to fill in some of the space that we created here. Cool. Let's bring this one down in pitch by a couple as well. Maybe put in another slice here. Maybe bring this instead to a couple of steps down more. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. It sort of shuffles and stumbles a bit. I like that. What I'm after, I think, is to change these up. Ooh, that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and copy all of that and duplicate that. I know we've lost some viewers on the stream now that I'm just into hardcore writing mode. So for those of you who are still hanging out, thanks for your time. Oh, I'm copying too much here. I just want to copy those first 4 bars. There we go. Let's go ahead and bring back the clap now as well. But let's make it a little bit of a different pattern than it was originally. Make this one a little bit lower in volume. Now I'm just having fun. I'm just writing. I've shown the technique that I really wanted to show, which was how to get those rhythmic loops created out of just those really standard, dub chords. And now we've got these a lot more interesting, rhythmic loops happening that are playing back a variety of chords and not just the same exact timbre of chord every single time. And now I'm just having fun writing some stuff. Okay, so let's take the crash out of the downbeat of this pattern as well, because it just happened on the previous pattern. And this isn't like banging, aggressive music. We don't need lots of crashes to happen, but a few here and there that really let the listener know that we're moving on to a different section, I find is still a really useful thing to have. I've brought that clap back in, and let's go ahead and just a 1-bar pattern, and let's go ahead and copy that. Copy, and then let's put that in throughout the pattern. So the clap disappeared for the first introduction of the chord change, and now we're bringing the clap back again as we continue, evolving that. Let's go ahead and save what we've done at this time. All right. Running almost out of coffee here. Maybe got 1 sip left. We've been going for just about 2 hours. All right, not bad. Let's bring the hi-hats back already, because I really like the rhythm that those provide. We took them out, for the introduction of the chord change. And now we just bring those back to help the momentum keep pushing forward, right? Hell yeah. All right. Suddenly I've noticed, though, that our pumping atmosphere is gone, and I really would like to keep that going the whole time, I think. So let's figure out where that's at. It's instrument number 13, and let's go back to the pattern 4 and find out, okay, I'm not sure. Oh, I see what I did wrong there. I deleted the wrong sample. I was meaning to take away the impact sound, but instead I took away the pumping atmosphere sound. Let's try it now. Yeah, now our atmosphere is back. Right on. And let's go ahead and save at this time as well. I told you I'm a chronic oversaver, and I encourage you all to be chronic oversavers as well. So we put a good, 2 hours of work into this project. If we had a power flux or anything like that, and well, this is a battery-operated device, granted, and it wouldn't snap the power, even if I pull the power cable out the back. I love the Mini. You can just sit here, and hold it in your hands and work with it if you want to. It's just an amazing, fun thing to work with. But for the purpose of the streams, I like to keep it nice and steady for everyone. So we have it on a stand. In case if any of you missed that, this is the absolute perfect stand for the Tracker Mini. This is from KV Gear. And this is their, I believe it's called the M1 utility stand. I could be mistaking that. And it's got a different cross beam than it would normally come with. I covered that in a video about a month or so ago on the channel. So if you've got a Tracker Mini and you want the absolute perfect stand for it, definitely check that video out. Again, that's KV Gear Stands. Woo, I love this stand. I think we could maybe introduce a second ride cymbal pattern happening here. Let's do that. Go back into the Dub Spectrum pack and go into the Ride Loops folder. Whoops. Start at the end this time. I really liked, I think it was the second one originally. Yeah, I really like the way that sounds. Let's add that in. But what I want to do is I want to not just only tuck that back in the mix, but I want to put that side chain pumping effect on that ride as well. So it's really, you know, got that, I can't think of the word I'm looking for here. That subtlety that's adding to the rhythm. That's not really what I'm trying to say, but that's all I can think of at this exact second. So I'm going to put an LFO on that. We're going to set that to a saw shape and move that down to 4 steps. And leave the volume settings the way they are temporarily and see what track I have available. I have track 7 available, and I can put that in every 2 bars, and we can see what that sounds like. A little bit of movement and the upper frequency spectrum to keep the listener's interest and keep that momentum going in the track. Yeah. Down in the mix a little bit, bring a high pass filter onto that ride, make it really subtle, just to help, you know, enhance the atmosphere and texture of the sounds. Let's make a little bit of panning happen on that sound with an LFO to get it moving in the stereo field just a little bit. And let's save at this time. Got a nice little pump happening in the background atmos at this time. Alright, if we go back into our arrangement screen now, I can take that last pattern, and instead of having 4 play twice, I can have pattern 5 play there. If I was getting really detailed now, I would take pattern 3 and I would copy that. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and make that in this slot. Let's make a variation of 3 happen. So the next available empty pattern I have is pattern 6. Let's go here and let's go to pattern 3. Let's copy pattern 3. Let's go to pattern 6 and let's paste pattern 3. And what I can do right off the jump is we can delete the impact sound from happening there, so it doesn't happen 2 patterns in a row, which I think is really important. So now we've got, you know, the patterns a little bit out of order, but that doesn't really matter as long as you can kind of keep that straight in your head while you're writing. Let's go ahead and play the song and see what it sounds like from the beginning. I think what we're going to do is I think we're going to go ahead and in pattern 1, I think we're going to take the hi-hats out for the first 4 bars to create a little bit more interest and a little bit more movement happening. We'll just remove those from the very first 4 bars. So they come in on measure 5 instead of at the very beginning. Let's try that. In fact, I think we could even get a little bit more dramatic, and we could, on the shaker part, which, what is that, on track 4 here? No, it's on track 3? Yeah, so on track 3, let's do the same thing with the shaker. Let's take the shaker out for the very first 4 bars. So the first 4 bars is just the atmosphere and just the chord loop. Let's hear that. 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2. Bring in the hats. So a little bit more progression happening in that intro. Cool. Lastly, on pattern number 3, where we introduced kind of the full meat of everything for the first time. Oh wait, I don't have an extra. We used all of the tracks on pattern 3. I wonder if we could squeeze in that impact sound somewhere on pattern 3. Like I've got this tiny little bit of room here, like 8 steps before the chord stab hits, and I bet you we could get away with bringing in that noise burst for just real quick there. Yeah, we absolutely can. So let's go ahead and do that. So now on pattern 3, where the meat comes in for the first time, we get a little bit of an impact sound as well. Let's hear it in its entirety. Getting ready to change up the chord now, the rhythmic chords. Now we're going to really change up the chords because we sliced it up. Something's a little bit off in that transition there. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but that's something that I can figure out later. I'm not just going to keep writing for like 3-4 hours per se, but really what I wanted to get across was how to create those rhythmic chord loops that we now have 10 of in this track, and I can just keep chopping those up as needed. I can mix back and forth between the two as needed and keep creating different sections, different vibes, and can keep that forward momentum happening and that listener interest happening throughout the track using those different chord loops that we created using those random techniques at the beginning of this stream. I am going to go back through and put the timestamps in this stream so you can find the more important points in the working process if you're watching this on the replay. And we're going to go ahead and call it today. I appreciate the few of you who are remaining on the stream. Thanks for being here. I'm going to go ahead and play it one more time, and then we're going to go ahead and call it for today. So until next time, my friends, take care of each other.